Money Vikings, Money Viking G here. Thanks for joining me. I have for you probably one of the most important videos and messages that I am going to deliver to date on this channel. And I think you'll see why if you just put me on the background and listen, because nobody wants to look at this mug. But I think you'll understand where I'm coming from when I talk about the critical nature of something like Bitcoin and the attractiveness of something like Bitcoin to change people's lives. And what I'd like to do is step back and take a macro view from a Gen X perspective in terms of the economic turmoil and what we've all been facing for decades. I think the reality is that most of us know something is not right. Something is wrong with the system, and something is wrong with the money. And, you know, whether you are an economist or not, and most of us are not, I think you can just feel it. Most of us can feel it. You can feel it when you're trying to pay the bills. You can feel it when you're trying to get a raise. You can feel it when you're trying to find a job. You can feel it when you're just going to the grocery store. Yeah, there's big ticket news articles and headlines about inflation this or inflation that. But the reality is that something just seems broken about our system for most people, and it doesn't work for most people. In fact, it's just broken for most people, in my opinion. There's just something off with the money, and that's what leads someone to Bitcoin. But what I want to explain to you today is a long arc of how I came to that realization, and I think for many of you this will resonate. So very quickly, I'm calling this what led to Bitcoin, a Gen X perspective, but I think the perspective can be seen from any generation, from anyone that's worked for a few years to several decades. So just very quickly, my story, in a nutshell, very typical middle-class situation. Went to a good college, had a nice family, worked hard. I worked very hard in school. I worked very hard in college, did internships, and tried to land a good job, which I was able to do. And then from there, I tried to acquire some basic financial skills and understanding of things in order to build a life. Of course, right off the bat, I had some school loan debt. So right away, you're sort of right out the chute. I remember day one being handed the bill, and you're paying that monthly amount. And so from day one, you're kind of a little bit in debt. And then from there, I started noticing housing seemed out of reach. Even back then, this is the late 90s, housing, things like mortgages, things like all that, just trying to afford rent seemed very expensive even then compared to my salary. So I was young, didn't think much of it, just tried to continue to plug away, get ahead as best I could. Kept working and saving, working and saving, working and saving. So, getting ahead felt like a never-ending struggle. And then, you had the concept of, you're supposed to invest. Investing is the way to go. Well, didn't have a lot of education with that, so I got caught up with the typical, let's invest in individual stocks. Let's try to find and pick the individual stocks that we can pick that will lead to some investment gains. And, clearly we all know that picking individual stocks is, I think, a lot of times can be a fool's errand. A lot of times that does not result in very good results at all. So from there, let's fast forward to another situation, and that is the situation of the housing debacle. So what happens is the government's policy, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, you get loans to everybody. So everybody's getting loans, everybody's getting quote unquote free money, okay, for several years in the very beginning of my career. And from there, even before that, let's go back in time. Before that, 9/11 hits. So tragic on many levels, but then the crazy tragedy that played out for 2 decades after that is our country spent trillions of dollars on wars, endless wars. God knows how much was lost in those wars that was the money of the American people. And that was money that wasn't invested in bridges and roads and healthcare and schooling and education for people, right? It was spent on endless wars, trillions of dollars. So you start to look at these things and you start to get a little bit jaded, and you start to think something is off here. Some people are making tons and tons of money, and 90% of the people, 95% of the people are not. So then you had the housing debacle that I mentioned before. So everyone's getting free money, free loans, blah, blah, blah. Well, that fell like a house of cards, pun intended. Completely inflated housing prices, and all of a sudden it dropped. I was able to squeeze into a condo. It lost half its value within a year. So there you go. There was another blow. So just kept working, plugging along, paying taxes, squeezed into a property, etc., etc. Around this time, later on, we started Money Vikings. And the idea behind Money Vikings was, how do middle-class people get ahead? That was one of our biggest questions. How do you actually learn about money and finance and investing where you can actually get ahead? And that's what we've been doing at truewealth.moneyvikings.com and on our YouTube channel now for many, many years. So then you start realizing you're getting screwed by Wall Street on individual stocks. You're up against machines that are basically out trading you. You can't get ahead that way. Endless wars are continuing, so our public money is being spent and spent and spent, and we're going deeper into debt. A huge debacle of housing was created that set all kinds of people back, especially Gen Xers. A lot of us faced pay freezes at our companies because of the Great Recession. So you're getting years and years of pay freezes. At the same time, there is some inflation. Things are still going up gradually. But then COVID hits. So there's an interesting situation. Trillions of dollars sent out into the economy in stimulus money. And banks are bailed out during the Great Recession, right? Big banks, big automotive, all these large companies bailed out again and again. And all of a sudden, inflation then goes into hyperdrive. Now, most of us in the real world know inflation didn't start in 2020 or 2021. There was still inflation going on for decades before that. The cost of education was skyrocketing, and the cost of housing was going up quite a bit, and the cost of healthcare was going up a lot. So yes, maybe food was stabilized, maybe flat screen TVs were stabilized, but there was still inflation. But then in 2020, 2021, inflation starts to go into hyperspace. You're getting 12, 13, 14, 15% inflation. Okay? So that's about the time that I caught wind through my friend Jerry at Money Vikings. It was prior to COVID. Started hearing about this thing called Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I was an extreme skeptic at first. What is this? I don't understand it. What's its intrinsic value? What's it based on? What's it backed by? Blah, 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 blah. And over time, you start to realize as you're experiencing these existential situations that nothing is backed by anything. And that fiat money is not backed by anything. And that the government will print and create trillions of dollars and flood the market with it. They'll create situations where everyone will be on the take, and they'll inflate asset prices of real estate, and then that will collapse like a house of cards. It goes on and on, right? So, caught wind of this asset called Bitcoin. So you're thinking about it, it retains its value, it's decentralized, it's a way to store energy, it's digital gold, but it's much more than that. It's incorruptible, it's code, right? And it's set in code. And it's decentralized. No one can inflate or spend more of it. No one can manipulate it. So there it was. Wow, after 25 years of struggling, I finally start to realize that there seems to be a way to get ahead. And the answer to me was Bitcoin. It was kind of a eureka moment. No government, no company, no board of directors, no Wall Street, no aristocratic families behind it, no politicians destroying it, no greedy, business people, CEO just thinking about themselves, able to destroy it. The list goes on and on. But I just wanted to give you guys today that kind of 10-minute arching overview of all the struggles that many of you have gone through, many of us have gone through for decades now, that has led me to Bitcoin. That's why. You just see this for years and years and years. You're playing by the rules. You're doing the right thing. You're working hard. You're showing up every day. You're working for those, pay raises. You're trying to pay off some debt. You're trying to buy a house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you know what? It's hard. It's very hard to get ahead. You almost barely get ahead. And then if you do get to a point where you are kind of quote unquote ahead, inflation can totally destroy what you've built over 20, 25, 30, 40 plus years. That to me is the promise of Bitcoin. That's the value of it. Time will tell. Maybe I'm being tricked again. I'm not sure, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to put a certain percentage in there. And from what I can tell, it seems to be something that will stand the test of time and will help preserve and grow capital over time. But I wanted to share that journey with you. So thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share and all that. And more to come as we proceed on our true wealth journey. Take care.